A Siren Song Part 2. If you asked the sea what Mara was, it would call her a wanderer. Not because she lacked a home, but because her body never learned how to remain still. Her hands itched for rope and oar, her lungs for salt air, her eyes for wide water. Restlessness ran through her like tide, and yet her heart was steady, constant, loyal. When Mara loved, she loved deeply and without question. She hated cages, she hated cruelty. She hated that strangers believed beauty mattered more than kindness. She loved the ocean, and she loved Ilse. She knew the first evening she saw her on the dragon-scale dock of Safehaven. It was not beauty that reached her first, but something quieter and more certain, something true. Ilse stood as though she belonged to the horizon itself, still in a way that calmed the world around her. Her presence steadied Mara's pulse, the way quiet water steadies a drifting boat, a harbour made flesh. Mara had never meant to give her a name. The word had simply risen, unplanned, unguarded, the way some truths did. Shorelight. It was not poetry, it was recognition. Mara had always found her way by distant glimmers, lanterns on far coasts, stars caught between breaks in cloud, light trembling on black water. Ilse felt like something she had always known, the one who waited, the one who did not move, yet was always there. She never spoke that name to anyone else. It belonged to Ilse alone. At sea, Mara lived by current and quiet necessity. She sailed with those who struck at stranger supply ships along the western coast, quiet raids timed with fog and current. They freed prisoners when they could. They sank cargo when mercy required it. She never wanted legend or fear to trail her name. She only wanted her actions to matter, and then to return home to Ilse. And she always did. Her ship would slip into Safehaven beneath softened light, and her voice would carry ahead of her. Not a call, not a performance, a note shaped by belonging, and always, by the time her boots met the dock, Ilse was there. Until the night the water filled with iron and smoke. It began as a simple strike, a convoy rumoured to be carrying emberstone and one cage of Fey prisoners, something routine, something small. Mara stood at the helm, wind weaving through her hair, her crew ready and calm. Fog rolled in, not the soft fog of Safehaven, but something tainted, drawn from industrial smoke drifting across the water. It clung to the sails like damp cloth, heavy and wrong. Then more ships emerged from the haze. Iron and wooden hulls, reinforced bows, steam bleaching from pipes along their decks. Human vessels built not for travel, but for ambush. Mara's breath tightened. She recognized the trap even before the first shout rose across the water. Her ship would not outrun them, nor would the other Fey vessels. But perhaps, if she stayed, perhaps if she sang, perhaps she alone could buy the time her fellow seafolk needed to escape. Go, she told them, now. She began to sing, not a battle cry, not a spell, but a low resonance meant to steady her crew, to soften panic, to blur the stranger's focus. The sound carried across the water, emotion bent beneath siren tone the way grass bends beneath wind. As she sang, she watched the strangers draw closer, watched her crew hesitate, then turn their ships away. When the last of them was clear, she moved to follow. Too late. Her song delayed them, it shifted attention, slowed pursuit, but without magic, it was not enough. Her voice trembled from strain, her throat ached, her breath began to falter, and in that moment of weakness, they rushed her ship. Hands seized her arms, someone shouted, a club struck the back of her skull. She tried for one last note, not for her crew, but for Ilse. A call that might ride the water home, but the sound barely left her lips before darkness closed around her. Saltgrave was colder than any sea she had known. She woke, strapped to a metal table, the air thick with chemical sharpness, the walls humming with distant machinery. Chains held her wrists. A harsh lamp glowed above her head, its light too white, too cruel to look at. No one used her name. She's the Siren. Bring the sample. Restrain the throat. No bruising. Hands tightened a device around her jaw and throat, a metal frame pressed into soft places with careful precision. Panic surged. She tried to scream, but the pressure stole the sound before it could form. The extraction did not cut. It did not tear. It pulled. Her resonance, the living thread held deep within her throat, loosened and unspooled slowly, horribly, like tide dragging sand from beneath bare feet. She felt the exact moment her voice left her, felt silence rushing to fill the space. When it ended, her breath still moved, but something essential did not. They held up a glass bottle, light swirled inside, faint and trembling. Her voice, or the last echo of it. All she could do was lay there, tired and empty. They discarded her into stone and damp, a cell too deep for tides to reach. Without her voice, she could not call water, she could not steady fear, she could not even scream. Time lost all its edges. She slept curled in a corner, arms wrapped around the absence in her chest. She stopped trying to speak. The effort only scraped her raw and left her shaking. In time, even movement felt like too much. When she closed her eyes, she saw Ilse on the dock, waiting, steady as driftwood wedged against tide. Sometimes memory hurt worse than silence. So she closed herself to it, closed her thoughts, closed the world down to what she could endure. She listened instead to the distant rumble of waves battering the island stone, letting their rhythm carry her away. Seasons passed without shape or number, and in the long quiet between waking and sleep, she wished, without words, for a soft and soundless death. At some point, a new prisoner was dragged into the cell beside her, discarded in a sound of pain. He slumped against the dividing wall, breath ragged and uneven. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked faintly, like static trapped in fog. "Stormborn," he murmured when she turned her head toward him. Or, "I was." He told her about the chemicals the strangers had used to mute the storms inside him. His markings had faded, his hair lay flat against his head. Whatever he had once been, they had carved it down to something manageable. He learned about her name, not from her, but from a guard who taunted as he passed the cell, the Siren without a voice. The Stormborn, Tilda was his name, spoke a little softer after that, as if sound itself might shatter her. He asked nothing of her, he offered what little comfort he could through presence alone. That evening, as the air hung thick with mildew and hopelessness, he said quietly, "I overheard something on the transport here. Guards talking." She did not look up, but a small part of her still listened. "They said Saltgrave might move a Siren to the mines, since she's gone quiet. Said orders came down from some Shorelight office, or Shorelight directive, something like that." Something stirred in Mara at the sound of the word. She lifted her head, slow, disbelieving. Shorelight? The word shaped itself in silence, her lips formed it, though no sound emerged. Tilda nodded. "I assumed it was some kind of code. Humans do love their codes." Mara pressed her palm to the stone wall. Her breath trembled once, then again. She felt something spark in her chest. Not voice, not song, but warmth. Shorelight was not a code. Shorelight was Ilse. A signal, a message threaded into rumour, a hand reaching across impossible distance to say, "I am here. Keep breathing. There is a way." Mara gripped the wall until her fingers ached. "Say it again," she mouthed. Tilda did. And something in her that had lain motionless for so long took one small aching step towards life. She began to stand on shaking legs. She began to eat what was given to her. The fog in her mind shifted. Her thoughts stilled for brief moments, and in those moments she felt a faint warmth beneath her chest, like someone's hand pressing gently against her heart. Ilse. She felt her, far away but unmistakable. She did not question how, dryads did not call across distance, but Ilse's presence was steady and real all the same. If Ilse was there, if there truly was a way, then Mara must try to survive. Footsteps returned to the corridor. Wasted labour. Move her to the mines. She was chained with others who had been broken or dulled, Tilda among them. They were pushed into a rusted iron cage, bolted hastily to the deck of an old ship. The metal was pitted and thin with age. The bolts looked tired. The deck beneath them creaked with every swell. This was not a ship meant for living cargo. It was built to carry weight, nothing more. The sky darkened as they were hauled out to sea. Clouds gathered thick and low. Mara felt it immediately. Her body leaned toward a different course, an old instinct stirring despite everything. But the strangers did not listen to water or sky. They followed routes drawn on paper and trusted iron to hold. The storm rose, wild, unpredictable, angry in a way Mara had always respected. Wind howled across the deck. Rain cracked against wood and hissed where it struck hot steam vents. Waves slammed the hull until the ship groaned like a wounded creature. The storm worsened. Waves climbed higher. The old ship pitched deeper with every swell. The cage screeched as its rusted bolts began to fail. Metal shrieked in protest as it slid across the deck, its prisoners clinging to the bars. Guards shouted, scrambling to refasten it, but the sea was just too wild. The cage struck the rail and tore through it. Metal bars smashed wood apart. Guards and sailors were flung in all directions, some clinging to what remained of the deck, others vanishing into the churning water along with the cage. Mara and the others hit the sea with brutal force. Cold knifed into her chest, stealing what breath she had left. The impact drove her deeper before instinct dragged her upward again. Beneath the water the cage had broken open, its weakened base torn free. One by one they kicked and clawed their way out, fighting both chains and panic. She could not sing to steady them, she could not call the currents, she could not soften fear or bind them together. All she could do was survive. Kicking, pulling, clawing through water that felt heavier than stone. Her arms burned, her lungs screamed. Waves tore them apart, scattering bodies into darkness and foam. For a time she lost all sense of direction. Then the world went dark. She woke on a rocky shore beneath a grey, unyielding sky, her body aching all over. Waves lapped at her ankles, her throat burned raw. Her limbs trembled uncontrollably as she dragged herself higher, collapsing onto cold stone at the edge of a cliff. Somehow she was alive, but she was also alone. She held her arms close to her body and focused on her breathing. Her voice was still gone, but the warmth in her chest remained, faint, flickering, enough to remind her that not everything had been taken. With bruised fingers and shaking legs, she climbed the cliff's edge and found the remnants of an old coastal path. She was in human territory. Roads were dangerous, old paths less so. Behind a farmer's house, she stole a rough cloak and boots too large for her feet. They smelled of smoke and hay, but they hid her well enough. She walked toward Black Harbour, or at least she thought she was. Without her voice, direction did not come easily. The world felt subtly misaligned, like a compass missing its needle. Painful step after painful step slowly eased her breathing. Perhaps it was the repetition, perhaps it was the simple knowledge of motion and open air. Then she felt it again, a gentle pull beneath her ribs, a warmth shaped like patience, like roots waiting beneath soil. She did not have her voice, but she had something else, and it was enough to keep her moving. Ilse searched the coast in long, tireless arcs. Rumours drifted through the docks of Black Harbour, a storm at sea, a cargo ship broken open, prisoners lost to water and wind. Humans whispered of danger, of loose fae and shattered chains. Ilse listened without comment. She traced currents with her eyes. She spoke with dock workers who never looked twice at a cloaked stranger. And sometimes, when no one else could hear, she addressed the bottle she carried pressed tight against her chest. "You are alive," she whispered. "I know you are." She remembered planting the rumours she hoped had carried into Saltgrave. Disguised in stiff human clothes, she had stood among labourers unloading crates near Black Harbour. She had spoken softly, just loud enough to be heard, about a new directive concerning Fey prisoners. She used the word shorelight with care. The workers treated the unfamiliar term as official, but Mara would know better. Shorelight was not an office or a code, it was a promise. Ilse hoped the rumour had reached her, hoped it had slipped through stone and iron into whatever cell held her, hoped it had carried one clear truth across the distance: there is a way. She held the bottle gently, always aware of its fragile echo, whispering to it as if Mara could somehow feel the soundless motion of her lips. "I'm coming," she murmured. "I will find you." The coastal wind tugged at her cloak. Her feet ached. Cold settled deep into her bones. Still, she walked on. Near dusk she reached a small copse of trees clinging stubbornly to life beside an old coastal path. Their trunks were thin, scarred by salt and wind, but they held just enough strength to offer shelter. Ilse stepped into their shade and felt the shift immediately, the quiet recognition of land welcoming one of its own. She sank to her knees among the roots, the bottle held close. "I will find you," she said again, her voice rough with days of silence drawn tight by hope. She rested her forehead against the nearest trunk, just for a moment, just to breathe. The moment did not last long before a sound reached her through the trees. Ilse went dryad still, her body locking into quiet readiness, not fear, not entirely, but a bracing, a gathering. She turned slowly. At the edge of the tree stood a shape that tugged at something deep and aching. Recognition moved before thought. It brought her to her feet. It drew her one step forward, then another, until the shape resolved into a body she knew. Mara. Thin, worn, cloaked in stolen cloth, boots too large, hair tangled by salt and wind, eyes hollowed by exhaustion. Alive. Mara froze when she saw her. For one suspended heartbeat, neither of them moved. The world narrowed to breath and gaze and the impossible fact of each other. Recognition arrived like tide returning after long drought. Mara stepped forward first, one trembling breath, then another. Ilse moved faster than she remembered and met her halfway. They folded into each other without hesitation, arms tight, foreheads pressed together. Mara's breath shook against Ilse's shoulder, and Ilse held her as though anchoring her soul hold back from the edge of the world. No words were needed. Words would have broken under the weight of it. Ilse lifted her hands and cupped Mara's face, then kissed her, tender, searching, carrying relief, grief, and the fierce devotion that had carried her across half of Nysera. Mara kissed her back with the same hunger of nearness, the same trembling gratitude. When they parted, Ilse's hands lingered at Mara's cheeks, as if afraid she might fade. Then Ilse let one hand fall and drew the bottle from her cloak. Mara stilled again. Recognition flickered across her face. She reached out and brushed one finger across the glass, a quiet greeting for something once held inside her. Ilse eased the stopper free, her fingers shaking. They held their breath as a warmth slipped from the bottle, a faint swell of tone, soft as memory. It drifted between them like a sigh, brushed Mara's skin with a gentle grief, then thinned and lifted into the veil. Mara closed her eyes. Sorrow rose through her like tide. Not despair, the deeper grief of knowing a part of herself had been taken and would not return. Ilse read the unspoken weight in her face and touched her cheek. "You are whole," she said softly, voice or no voice. Mara leaned her forehead against Ilse's in reply. Then she lifted her hand and pointed toward the distant horizon where Saltgrave lay hidden beneath the storm. She touched her throat, the bottle, and finally she bent and pressed her fingers to the earth beneath their feet. Ilse understood. There were others still suffering, others broken, others trapped. She took Mara's hands in hers. "First we tend you," she whispered. "Then, whatever you choose, I walk beside you." Above them, the veil softened. It shifted in silence. It gathered the drifting echo, drew it into its gentle keeping, and held it there.